Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's comedian Leo Kearse and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow would consider any third-party declaration of a no-fly zone over Ukraine as participation in the armed conflict. Speaking this afternoon at an aviation school in Moscow, Putin said his country would view the intervention as a threat. It's as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky pushed NATO to impose a no-fly zone over his country. But the alliance says the move, which would bar all unauthorised aircraft from flying over Ukraine, could provoke widespread war in Europe with Russia. Evacuation efforts in the Ukrainian cities of Mariopol and Volnovaka have been halted as Russia reportedly ignores an agreed temporary ceasefire. That's according to the Red Cross. Authorities in Ukraine say fighting is taking place in the Zaporizhzhia region, which is where one of the humanitarian corridor ends. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk says Russia is thwarting the evacuation plan by not observing a ceasefire.
As you know, starting from 9 a.m, we had a preliminary agreement to create 2 humanitarian corridors in Volnovaka and Mariupol. I can confirm the fact that Russia violated the agreement in which the Red Cross was an intermediary. It did not fulfill undertaken duties and is shelling the town of Volnovaka. We call on the Russian side to stop shelling, restore ceasefire and allow columns to move along the humanitarian corridor so that children, women and elderly people can leave the towns.
The number of refugees fleeing the Russian invasion could rise to 1.5 million by the end of the weekend. The UN Refugee Agency say the figure stands at 1.3 million and that despite the possibility of humanitarian corridors, the situation remains dire with military action in many places across Ukraine. Speaking in Poland earlier, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced further support.
I'll support the needs of Ukrainians in Poland and other countries. The Biden administration just requested of Congress $2.75 billion in humanitarian assistance. That's both to meet the need of vulnerable people and communities inside Ukraine, as well as to support refugee services, including here in Poland.
The Ministry of Defence says the rate of Russian air and artillery strikes in Ukraine has slowed in the last 24 hours. An intelligence briefing from the MOD reports Ukraine continues to hold on to cities Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariupol. Authorities say it's highly likely the cities are surrounded by Russian forces. Former NATO planner Philip Ingram told GB News Ukraine should brace itself for more aggression from Russia.
The Ukrainians, a much smaller, weaker force on paper, but with a real resolve that shows the human element of it, are holding back the Russians. In military terms, they fixed them. The Russians haven't got the ability to maneuver, and they've stopped them achieving their objectives. The trouble is, historically, when the Russians don't get their objectives, they then start to go really nasty, and we're in for the long game.
Well, Russia has blocked access to Facebook in the country. The state regulator says the social media platform has been taken down for its discrimination against Russian media. Facebook Vice President of Global Affairs, Sir Nick Clegg, says Russians have been silenced from speaking out. A Formula One team has sacked its Russian driver following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Nikita Mazepin's contract has been terminated by the American-owned team Haas. It says he will not race in Formula One this season. The team also ended its deal with its Russian sponsor Uralkali, owned by Mr Mazepin's father. Australian cricket star Shane Warne had been experiencing chest pains prior to his death in Thailand, according to police in the country. The 52-year-old also reportedly had a medical history of asthma and some heart issues. It's been announced the Great Southern Stand at Melbourne Cricket Ground is going to be named after the leg spinner. And Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has offered Mr Warne's family a state funeral. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, let's get straight back to Nana.
It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, when you hear the name Gavin Williamson, what springs to mind? Accident-prone Frank Spencer, perhaps, in Some Mothers Do Have 'Em? I mean, if you're about my age or older, you'll definitely remember that one. And if that doesn't resonate, this comment might.
Russia should go away, it should shut up.
So, when twice sacked Gavin Williamson, possibly the worst education secretary, definitely in my lifetime, is offered a knighthood, you can't help but question how on earth this has happened. Even with the most generous of intentions, there is no way that that man, in my view, is deserving of such an honour. And to be honest, it brings the concept of knighthood into disrepute. I mean, if you think I'm being unfair, his track record not only consists of a string of ridiculous, childish gaffes, but his performance as an MP wasn't much better. Described by potty-mouthed Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, although she's a one, as a prat, he was sacked as Defence Secretary by Theresa May after being blamed for leaking of top-secret sensitive information on China about phone giant Huawei from the national security briefings, something that he has always denied. It wasn't doing this job where, at the height of the Salisbury poisoning, whilst he was doing this job, he famously told Russia to go away and shut up. Perhaps he could give that a go now. And in 2018, he risked a diplomatic row with France over the Syria conflict by saying, "What is the point in listening to French politicians?" Remember the disaster for the schools during COVID? He left children to go hungry, and if it hadn't been for the likes of Marcus Rashford, who stepped in voluntarily to pressurise the government, God knows what would have happened. And to make matters worse, Gavin then confused rugby star Mario Itoje. He thought that he'd been speaking to Marcus Rashford, who, by the way, only got an MBE for his efforts. It makes an absolute mockery of the whole honours process. Gavin Williamson created 2 years of complete chaos over exams. He failed to get laptops out to kids struggling to learn during the lockdowns, and I can remember how he ignored the pleas from head teachers to shut down their schools due to COVID, staff illness and absences across the board, which saw him open schools for one day and then be forced to shut them the next. Frankly, his record is astonishing and disgraceful. So how on earth has this been allowed to happen? The key could lie in the fact that he was Boris Johnson's campaign manager, and we've seen the damage that ex-employees can inflict, namely Dominic Cummings. The last thing Boris needs right now is another one of those. Munira Wilson, a Liberal Democrat education spokeswoman, said this: "The only award Gavin Williamson should be given is the one for the worst education secretary in history. People across the country will be outraged at this reward for his abysmal failures. It is an insult to every child, parent and teacher who struggled through COVID against the odds. It shows this government only cares about those at the top. And Williamson's timeline in office is a catastrophe. A knighthood for political and public service makes a mockery of the honour and, frankly, shouldn't be allowed.
Russia should go away. It should shut up.
Arise, Sir Gavin. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. In my difficult conversation, that's at 5 o'clock, I'll be taking a deeper look into the refugee crisis in Ukraine, as the UN says that more than 1.2 million people have fled the country to find somewhere safe to stay. We'll cross live to Poland to meet a Brit and his Ukrainian partner who have travelled to help people cross the border. I'll also be joined by a Conservative MP to hear his thoughts on the UK government's response. The great British debate this hour. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that the West's reluctance to intervene in the invasion of his country has given Russia a green light to continue bombarding towns and villages. He made the comments in a fiery speech over NATO's refusal to implement a no-fly zone around Ukraine. So I'm asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? And we'll get the latest from the royal household with friend of the show and royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. And on the agenda this week, why Prince Harry may have been the inspiration for the new Batman movie. My goodness, I can't see how. Tell me what you think. Mine depends whether it's good or bad, though. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You could email gbviews@gbnews.uk or send me a tweet at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, comedian Leo Kearse and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Hello. Calvin, your afro is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I love it.
Thank you.
How big is it going to get?
We need to compare one day. You need to get your afro combed out and we'll compare sizes.
I don't think so. There'll be gaps in mine. It's just as you get older, it doesn't quite work like that. I wish it did, if only. I could take that right off and make one of these and stick it on.
Please don't.
God, that would be funny, wouldn't it? If you do ever shave it off, if you could keep it in shape, then I could buy it off you. Yeah, I could buy it off you. So, I mean, on a serious note, Gavin Williamson, I mean, come on.
It's not a serious note, is it?
It's not, it's a joke.
He's hilarious. He makes some good points. Why do we listen to French politicians? And Russia should go away, shut up, to be honest. Those are fair points. But I was a teacher under Michael Gove, Justine Greening, Nicky Morgan and Gavin Williamson. And he was the worst by a long shot. In fact, I think he's been the worst in a generation because he's let down an entire generation. It wasn't just a case of 2 school years. It's bigger than that. It's worse than that. We had the monster algorithm that affected the GCSE A-level results. That meant that kids couldn't get into universities because they didn't have a chance to sit exams and prove the knowledge that they'd learned. We've got kids throughout all year groups that have missed out on so much learning now that it's not just a case of they've missed out on a year or 2 years of content, because the progress and the way we build on knowledge means that they've missed out on years and years worth of knowledge at this point. The fact that he closed the schools before we even had lockdown, he announced that we were closing schools. They didn't need to close. Schools should have been open the entire time.
Everything should have been open.
Always. He capitulated to the teachers' unions. That's what it was. They put pressure on the government and he buckled. And I have no idea why, after all that, the monstrous algorithm, letting other students, making kids wear masks all day. He's been rewarded.
It is unbelievable.
Teachers, he buckled to the unions because teachers saw an opportunity to have 2 years on holiday. It's insane. They already get most of the year on holiday, but then they wanted.
I want to stand for that. I want to stand for that. Teachers,
they wanted teachers
are the hardest working people.
They are glorified babysitters.
The unions are politicians.
They're glorified babysitters.
The unions want to bring down the government.
They've got a curriculum to follow. It's all done for them.
So, are you going to teach your own kids? Or are you going to send them to school then?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with the schools.
It's easy how quick people are to criticise teachers, but then when all the kids got sent home, people quickly realise how much hard work teachers have.
I'll be honest with you, Leo. I lecture in schools as well. And I have to say that when I leave, at the end of the day, I feel like I've aged 10 years. And I frankly can't, I mean, I love the jobs and things, but I can't wait to go at the end of it. I'm like, this has been great, but thank goodness I don't have to do it full time. But I will say they do get nice long breaks. Yeah. And during COVID, I mean, they weren't the only ones that were working hard. A lot of people who didn't get any credit were working incredibly hard, and others lost their jobs.
I would have loved to have been working hard, but I couldn't because for some reason comedy clubs were shut. So yeah, that wasn't fair. And then to see people in the NHS bragging that they had more work on than usual, it was really annoying. But yeah, Gavin Williamson, I can't believe they're considering giving him a knighthood. Knighthoods are specifically for people who've contributed hugely to society. People like Cyril Smith, Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, these kind of people
Captain Tom Moore.
These people are the sirs. And you know, if you're not reaching that level of Jimmy Savile,
wait, well, no, he shouldn't be. But what about Tony Blair's there?
What about Cyril Smith? You think Cyril Smith should have?
But what about Tony Blair?
Do you think Rolf Harris? That kind of was the subtle point I was making.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people.
I don't know where you're taking this, Leo. But
I don't really know where he's going. I'm just moving on from that.
As a government minister for leaking top secret information,
exactly.
You should never be hired as a minister ever again. Yeah, he was not only hired as a minister again, he's been knighted. So he has something on someone, doesn't he?
Well, I think so. It's got to be. It's got to be. I mean, and the person who's sort of pushing that forward would be someone like Boris. So I'm wondering what's going on there because it makes no sense. And anybody looking on the outside can see this man, this person should not be awarded a knighthood. And I suspect. I think when it comes out to this, I think the public should get to vote on that. Because I'd say no, he shouldn't be.
But then wouldn't the knighthoods just be like X Factor?
Well, so then they need to. Well, at least these people have talent on X Factor.
Well, so you think we should so Paul Potts, instead of getting a season singing on cruise ships in the Caribbean, he gets a knighthood?
I'm confused where you're going with it again. I'm lost. You've lost me.
So X Factor is like a talent show where people vote.
I know. I've seen X Factor, but I don't see.
But you can
vote. You can vote on anything, right? Basically, but on this particular instance, if they're going to be giving these knighthoods out in this fashion, where we can all clearly see that that's not right, then there needs to be some accountability. And I think the public need to say something because this is the level of knighthood that the whole role, it diminishes it. It just diminishes it immediately.
It's clear corruption and it undermines the whole process. You're absolutely right.
How could it be diminished further? It's Cyril Smith, Rolf Harris, Jimmy Savile. These are all knights. These are all knights of the realm, and they don't even have a sword or like a horse to ride into battle. They're not proper knights. They're not going to lead the Crusades.
They're things that came out afterwards that we didn't know about when they were knighted. With this, he's already corrupt.
Everyone in the BBC, everyone in the BBC knew.
Well, listen, I don't think you can say everyone.
It was an open secret. That's why Jerry Sadowitz, David Icke were outing him.
I'm going to stop you there. And you know why? Because you just said everyone in the BBC knew, and that's just not true. Because I was in the BBC, I didn't know. Lots of people didn't know. We are not talking about that. We're looking at people who really, in our eyes, currently, as we see them, with what we know of them, and the public from what we see, we can see, as the general public, that this person doesn't deserve a knighthood. And there's a list of string of errors that we've actually had to live through and experience to know full well that he certainly doesn't deserve one. And what is the recall? What can we do about it? There's nothing, is it? We have to tolerate it and accept it. Is that right?
Democratic, yeah, absolutely. I've written many times about this, as have many other people, giving him solutions throughout the whole lockdown process on what to do with schools, how to fix the situation. And he kept making the same mistake over and over again, kept closing the schools, kept keeping the kids out, kept enforcing restrictions and making them wear masks and ridiculous things that did nothing for or it was detrimental to their health. So I think it's absolutely inexcusable that he's granted an honour.
Yeah, and whilst I do agree that, yes, Russia should shut up and go away with the comment that he made, I do actually agree with that. At the time he said it wasn't really very well timed at all, was it?
It's not funny, but it's not statesmanly.
It's not diplomatic, is it, at all? It's just a ridiculous comment that will just simply aggravate people. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. It's 18 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Now, after the break, it's the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has attacked Western leaders in a speech for not implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. He says that their reluctance to get involved has given Russia a green light to continue bombarding towns and villages. So what do you think? Get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me your thoughts, and we'll hopefully read some of those out. You can also tweet at GBNews or at Nana Akua1. There's a poll up asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? Cast your vote now, but first, it's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many away from eastern and central England. Let's take a look at those details. Zooming into the southwest, and it will be a fine end to the day. It will turn chilly though once the sun goes down as skies remain clear. Moving east, and it will be a cloudy and damp evening across southeast England and East Anglia. Winds will be brisk, especially along the coast. We move back into the clear skies across Wales this evening, with just a little cloud across the hills and mountains. Far west of the Midlands will also see clear skies this evening, but elsewhere it will be rather cloudy. The cloud will be thick enough in places to give some rain. Northern England, however, will see a dry and fine evening with any cloud and showers generally easing away. It will lead to a chilly start to the night, though with a frost quickly developing. There will be a few showers still in the north of Scotland. Otherwise, it will be dry and clear this evening, leading to a cold end to the day. It will also be chilly in Northern Ireland as the sunshine gives way to clear skies this evening. Winds will be light, leading to the odd fog patch forming. Overnight, we'll see the clearest and coldest weather in the north, whereas further south will be cloudier, but temperatures staying above freezing here. That's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Anaya Falarin Iman, for the discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here. From big ideas to questions shaping the public conversation, we tackle the moral, cultural and political implications of news stories.
We need to share this conversation democratically.
It has become so toxic, this debate.
They relish this kind of discourse.
From fascinating guests to challenging ideas, you won't want to miss it. The discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here, GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's now time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the West's reluctance to intervene in the country has given Russia a green light to keep bombarding towns and villages. Here's what he had to say yesterday.
Today, there was a NATO summit, a weak summit, a confused summit, a summit where it was clear that not everyone considers the battle for Europe's freedom to be the #1 goal.
Now, he made those comments in part because actions involving direct military confrontation with Russia, like a no-fly zone, have been dismissed by NATO leaders. But should we really just leave Ukraine to fend off the Russians? Or is it time now for NATO to get involved? So I'm joined by Hamish de Breton-Gordon, a former British Army colonel and an expert in chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear materials. Hamish, thank you for joining me. So, I mean, I'll come straight to the question. Do you think now is the time for the West to become directly involved in this conflict and engage NATO?
I have great sympathy for the President of Ukraine. We've seen the devastation going forward. But I spent the last 34 years of my life on the battlefields of the world, and they're dreadful. I spent the last 6 years in and out of Syria. I've seen the Russians at very close hand. I've seen the devastation they've done in Syria. They and the Syrian regime have killed over 800,000 civilians. And sadly, we did nothing about that. And that is half the reason, or probably even more of it, why Putin has marched into Ukraine and is now doing exactly what he did in Syria. He's attacking hospitals, he's attacking schools, and he's killing civilians. So quite rightly, the president of that country wants our help. Now, if we get involved in a no-fly zone or put troops into Ukraine, that could well lead to war in Europe or a global war, or even worse, even a nuclear war. However, Putin thinks we're weak, and that's why he moved in. We can't turn the clock back at what we didn't do over the last few months and years, but we must be resilient and strong. At the moment, we must give the Ukrainians all the support we can with anti-tank guided missiles and advice and other weaponry. They're about to start the fight for Kiev. And I think this is where the Russians are going to fall down, because they're going to take huge casualties. And one would hope that people in Russia will soon get the message. They know nothing about this at the moment, and get rid of Putin, because he is making decisions at the moment that are not rational, and that's dangerous.
So then I ask the question again, then is it time for NATO to get involved?
Well, we are involved. I think what you're saying is it time for us to get aircraft over Ukraine and tanks and troops into Ukraine. I don't think it is yet, because that will lead, I think, to a conflict between NATO and Russia. That could lead to a third world war, which could lead to nuclear war. And that is absolutely the last option. But we must be prepared. If Putin still keeps thinking that we're going to sit back and watch, then he is going to crack on and kill lots and lots of civilians and lots of Ukrainian military. So all the support we're given, we must tie it up, we must make it up. I think we want to put up from the no-fly zone. I don't think we can have British jets over Ukraine, but I don't see why we can't have drones, why we can't use our missiles that are outside Ukraine to support the Ukrainian army to attack and help them defeat those tank units, and also to help them take out some Russian aircraft. But to get into Ukraine with British and NATO soldiers, I think will lead to the Third World War.
But, I mean, some would argue that we're already there in the Third World War. And, of course, Putin will exploit weakness. I mean, Joe Biden was incredibly weak with his withdrawal of Afghanistan. So Putin would have seen that and thought, well, this is a real one, isn't it? You can see that this one hasn't really got his hands in the control centre at all. And then the weakness, in a sense, of NATO not really doing much or being hamstrung because of nuclear weapons. What's the point of NATO if, in the end, all we can do is just supply things like weapons to people who aren't in it? But then, ultimately, if Putin gets past Ukraine, I can't see what would stop him from reaching for other NATO countries.
Well, I entirely sympathise with your view. But again, having seen this at close hand, I know that we've got to avoid it at all possibilities. And just remember, when we had the red line on the use of chemical weapons in Syria, and I was there at the time, we had a vote in the British Parliament not to do anything about it. That was politically motivated, and that was absolutely shocking. And what really concerns me now is in Syria, the 4-year siege of Aleppo was broken by using chemical weapons. And I think there is a distinct possibility that the Russians could well go to that far. And that would be horrific because it's only civilians who suffer. But you're right. If there is a single tank track outside to the west of Ukraine or a single Russian boot, they're then on NATO territory, and Article 5 stipulates that attack on one is an attack on all. Unfortunately for Ukraine, despite the fact they want to be part of NATO, they are not at the moment. And I think there is still time. We must absolutely do all we can. We must make sure the Russian people know this megalomaniac is trying to get them involved in a third world war. He's threatening to use nuclear weapons. He's trying to terrify us, and he's terrifying a hell of a lot of people. So we've got to be strong. But the commitment of troops into Ukraine, I think, it's not the time yet. We must try and avoid war in Europe and the Third World War. To the nth degree, it would be a disaster.
Clearly trying to provoke that. He's trying to provoke a reaction to then justify his behaviour, as far as I can see. In your view, then, what do you see as the ultimate solution to this conflict?
Well, we must come to a peaceful solution. I'm very sad that we are probably going to have to appease Putin in some degree. Whether it's creating Ukraine as a neutral country, I don't know. I know it's not what the Ukraine people want. And then we must guarantee that we will rebuild it and help them and support them. I think also, as I've mentioned before, we must let the Russian people know what's going on in their name. This is like Stalin. He is acting like Stalin, and we know what happened to Stalin in the end. I just hope there's some decent people around Putin who've got morals and scruples, who will call him out eventually. But I think I've had looked very closely at the Russian military, and I was also a tank commander for many years. And the troops on the ground are very poor. You know, their tanks are running out of fuel, their people aren't eating, morale is very low. I think the Russians are going to have a real problem when they start fighting in the towns and cities. I think they're going to take huge casualties. And I think Putin is going to be in a really tricky place. But if he doesn't have a way out of this, he could make more irrational decisions. And we all know that he does have nuclear weapons, which is a huge concern. Until a week ago, I thought he would never, ever, ever use them. But we've seen him threaten them. We've seen him attacking nuclear power stations, which is almost as bad. We saw what happened when Chernobyl blew up in 1986 and the contamination reached this country. So something similar would be equally as disastrous. But I think at the moment, we've just got to be strong and firm, and we are paying for the fact that we've been weak, really, since the end of the Cold War and have not got involved in world events. So it's a tricky time coming up, and I really hope our world leaders have got a bit of steel in their backsides and will hold Putin to account.
Well, Hamish, it's really good to talk to you. I suspect that the people around him are as hamstrung as we are, and that somehow he's in their back pocket in some way. Well, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, thank you very much for talking to me. He's a former British Army colonel and an expert in chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear weapons and materials. Right, let's see what you've been saying. Jean says, I have a lot of sympathy for the Ukrainians who are suffering from the brutality of Putin, but my view is that for the security of British people, it's better if NATO and British troops don't get involved in the conflict. Nicola says, yes, how can we just stand back and watch Ukraine be decimated? Bob says, no, this is not our war. Keep your thoughts and views coming. I'd love to hear what they are at GB News. You can get in touch or email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You're watching me, Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, comedian Leo Kearse and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 4:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow would consider any third-party declaration of a no-fly zone over Ukraine as participation in the armed conflict. It's as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky pushed NATO to impose a no-fly zone over his country. But the alliance says the move, which would bar all unauthorised aircraft from flying over Ukraine, could provoke widespread war in Europe with Russia. Evacuation efforts in the Ukrainian cities of Mariopol and Volnovaka have been halted as Russia reportedly ignores an agreed temporary ceasefire. Authorities in Ukraine say fighting is taking place in the Zaporizhia region, which is where one of the humanitarian corridors ends. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk says Russia is thwarting the evacuation plan by not observing a ceasefire.
As you know, starting from 9 a.m, we had a preliminary agreement to create 2 humanitarian corridors in Volnovaka and Mariupol. I can confirm the fact that Russia violated the agreement in which the Red Cross was an intermediary. It did not fulfill undertaken duties and is shelling the town of Volnovaka. We call on the Russian side to stop shelling, restore ceasefire and allow columns to move along the humanitarian corridor so that children, women and elderly people can leave the towns.
The number of refugees fleeing the Russian invasion could rise to 1.5 million by the end of the weekend. The UN Refugee Agency says the figure stands at 1.3 million and that despite the possibility of humanitarian corridors, the situation remains dire with military action in many places across Ukraine. A Formula One team has sacked its Russian driver following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Nikita Mazepin's contract has been terminated by the American-owned team Haas. The driver says he's disappointed with the decision, but has treasured his time at Formula One. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Back to Nana Akua in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua and we return to our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has attacked the West for not implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. He says that the West's reluctance to get involved has given Russia a green light to continue bombarding towns and villages. So should we directly get involved in this, or is there too much at risk, and could that mean the conflict will escalate? Well, let's see what my panel think about that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and comedian Leo Kearse. Calvin, should NATO engage?
That question is troubling. And what I'm seeing at the moment is a lot of people that said we had no place in Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan are all now saying, why are we not in Ukraine yet? The same people, the metropolitan liberal elite, the mainstream media, are hyping this thing up. It's almost as if people want a World War III. They want escalation at this point. They're asking all the questions in a very worrying way, to be honest. People like Gordon Brown are talking about war crimes and such. Where was Gordon Brown when New Zealand and Australia were putting tyrannous, draconian measures on their people? Where was he when Canada was freezing the bank accounts of people that supported a charity fighting for freedom?
Or during the Iraq War.
Where was he with Tony Blair?
We know where he was then. Yes. But the double standards and the hypocrisy and the hyping up of all of this is terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think NATO should intervene yet, because I'm not finished watching Putin embarrass himself. He's clearly got a Potemkin army. It looks good in the parades, marching past him, and they all turn and salute. But when it actually comes to the crunch on the battlefield, they're being absolutely humiliated. We've got this vastly more militarily powerful nation. I mean, this is like if the UK and France decided to, and Germany decided to invade Wales. You know, to put it into scale. And obviously, you know, Wales has got, you know, fantastic soldiers, fantastic national spirit, just like Ukraine. But you know, you'd think we'd be able to do it in a weekend. Russia is being completely humiliated. They even released a victory statement. This is the hubris and the ego of Putin. Russia released a victory statement because they assumed they'd have done it. They had it scheduled. It went out. Now Russian troops, they're deserting. They're damaging their vehicles, putting holes in the fuel tanks, so they've got an excuse to desert and leave the battlefield. They don't want to be fighting their Ukrainian brothers and sisters. I think the whole thing's ridiculous. And now that Putin's been exposed as this, not just a tyrant, but a completely hapless, useless tyrant who can't even take, like, you know, a former bloc of the Soviet Union. I can only see two options. So Putin is either going to be felled from within, so somebody's going to tickle his ear with an ice pick, and you know, he'll be taken down in the classic Soviet palace coup, or China, which really needs Russia's resources, needs the energy, needs the minerals. It's going to see how militarily weak Russia is and annex Russia. And to be honest, that might not be the worst idea.
Well, you've missed the third one, that he might feel so backed into a corner that he feels he needs to press the button because he's got nothing else to lose because he's lost already.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the worrying thing, because he doesn't seem to be operating under the sort of rational calculus of a normal country's leader.
Do you think
he's operating emotionally, and he's operating with hubris and ego, which is dangerous?
You say that, but I think that this man has calculated this. This is a calculated move. The whole pincer movement around the outside of Ukraine, which is a classic move. They've done that before.
They've tried it, but they haven't done it. There's still, I mean, there's a 40-kilometre logjam going into Kyiv.
But this is in response to your comment that he's just acting on hubris and ego. I'm saying that he's acting in a calculated fashion. It might not be going according to plan, but he has planned it. This isn't just I'll just go in and do that.
Well,
and actually, I suspect his troops coming in were a distraction from the fact that he actually wanted to take all the coastal areas of Ukraine first. So he had the weak troops coming in whilst the ones who knew what they were doing.
So do you think Putin's plan was to completely cripple Russia economically and culturally? Do you think his plan was to completely be humiliated on the world stage?
No, what I'm saying is
with his army exposed as weak and hapless?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he had a plan. It's not ego or hubris. It was calculated. It's just going wrong.
I think Nana's right. Of course he has a plan. Of course he knows what he's doing. Everyone's saying, oh, he's a madman.
He doesn't know what he's doing.
Acting
No, he
irrationally.
does.
Of course he does. This is part of the plan. If you read his victory statement, he has a vision.
His victory statement.
Well, he's even planned that, hasn't he? He's even planned that.
Where's the victory?
But it's a very
Where's the victory?
But of course there isn't one. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that he has a very clear mission that he wants to achieve, and it's a different world vision to what we see. But that doesn't make him insane. I think he's a very bad man. But to paint him off as irrational kind of disregards everything that he's trying to do, and I think that's a very dangerous thing to do.
His actions sanctions have had the complete opposite effect to what his intended plan was. His intended plan was to, almost recreate the Soviet Union, and actually it's just driven, and also to weaken NATO and to weaken the European Union. Actually, it's strengthened Europe. It's strengthened NATO.
So if
all the
they're
European
so strong,
countries are upping the amount of money they spend on defence and the amount of money they spend on NATO.
That's all very well, but if they're so strong, then should NATO be getting involved? Because that's the question.
No, I mean, that would escalate it to the level of World War III. So, I mean, I don't think, as much as I'd like to see house prices come down in London, I don't want it to be from houses being evaporated themselves. NATO, at the moment, can't really step over that line and get involved, but it's important that we support Ukraine in all the ways that we possibly can. And the sanctions are completely unprecedented, by the way. They're really going to cripple Russia. But it's important that we support it, because this is a battle for Western liberal democracy. This is the values that keep us all safe. I mean, we think the world lives in democracy. 6.4% of the world's population lives under democracy.
Well, you say that, but what do you think of Calvin's comments, though, that there is this liberal elite who almost have a bleeding heart mentality that is saying, oh, we should go in, and, it's terrible, how could we do this, and da-da-da-da-da, whereas the bigger picture is, well, he's coming for us next if we do get involved.
Yeah, I've got to agree with Calvin. It's bizarre to see people who a month ago were saying we've got to wear face masks to protect us from an incredibly survivable disease, to now be saying, well, maybe nuclear war wouldn't be that bad. It's like, there's no rationality there. So that is bizarre.
It is a bit bizarre, but let's see your thoughts then, because you've been getting in touch as well, and this show is nothing without your views. Should we welcome on our great British voice, your opportunity to join in and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Tim Papworth is a farmer in Norwich. Hello, Tim. Thank you for joining us. So the question that everyone's asking really is it now time for NATO to get involved and actually get properly involved in the conflict?
Well, I agree with what Hamish was saying, to be honest with you, earlier. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not a NATO member. I don't think the right time is yet to get involved. When they get through Ukraine and start attacking Poland, in my opinion, that is when we've got to go in with NATO, and that will be World War III, which I'm very, very fearful of, because we don't want to go there. What Putin is trying to do is quite obvious to me. He's already got control of the oil and gas lines through Ukraine into Europe, and to a larger extent, he's also got control of food, because I'm a farmer, and you've got to remember, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. There's so much food produced in Ukraine that it feeds a lot of European countries. Like East Anglia is the breadbasket of the UK, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and he's controlling the food as well. When you start controlling the food, the next thing will be he's got power, he's got food, the next thing will be water, and he's won the battle, to be honest with you.
And he's got all the gas that you could possibly need. Thank you very much for that, Tim. We appreciate your view. That's Tim Papworth. He's there in Norwich, a farmer in Norwich. Well, you see, that's what I was saying, that he is strategically planning this as he's gone for. He's obviously made sure that he's in control of all the gas supplies and things like that to supply in the rest of the world. And by the way, he's not gone for the Ukraine for no real apparent reason. I mean, as Tim mentioned, it's the food supplies. They obviously have a huge production of wheat. But it's not just that. It's also the pipeline, the gas pipeline. I think it's Nord Stream 1 that goes under Ukraine. There's another one that goes through Belarus. So he is strategically putting things in place to make sure that he is in control of all of that. So he has planned this.
Yeah, I mean, the worry is that this is, just as, inflation is really getting out of control and the cost of living is spiralling for people, this is going to add to it. So the cost of energy is going to soar, it's going to be insane. Because we've left ourselves completely at the mercy of Russia with oil and gas, and also with wheat. That's going to cause food prices to spiral.
We've been saying on the show for a long time now, haven't we? We need to take energy in-house. We need to stop fracking, invest in nuclear, whatever we do, but do it in this country and stop importing our fuel and our energy. But also, we need to bolster our military defences. We need a better army, we need a better air force, we need a better navy, stronger, so that we're not reliant on NATO, we're not reliant on Europe and America, who is taking less of an interventionist stance at this point. But also, hopefully, this enables us to readdress our values. I don't think Russia's police force are painting rainbow flags on their cars. I don't think they're worried about how many genders there are or if someone can change gender and all these fluffy ideas that we're worrying about today. What we're seeing in the Ukraine is men are going out to fight. We're seeing women pick up guns. We're not seeing this toxic masculinity argument over there, are we? What we're seeing is people know what they stand for, they know what their values are, and over here we've lost that. So if this war makes us think about what we stand for again, that would be a good outcome.
Yeah, I mean, that would be good. And we've seen, the culture wars weaken the West from inside, and it would be good to see that stopped and reversed. But also, we've got to see that we're fighting for the freedom to have all these daft ideas like gender pronouns and stuff like that.
Well, that's exactly it. I'd fight for the right for people to say it, but I certainly don't agree with a lot of that. It's a load of baloney. But I mean, look, if we kind of look at that, to me, if this were me, what I would have done, and I'll tell you, when Putin said that he had his nuclear things on high alert, I would have said, OK, well, either you take them off high alert or we will maybe do something in somewhere like Moscow or something. So I would have stopped him a lot earlier. So in my eyes, this would never have escalated to this point because he would have had to do something to stop the engagement of this, and I would have warned him. So to me, that's where I would have done, and I would have done something a lot earlier. But instead, we all went, "Oh, it's on high alert. Oh no, well, let's all back off. We should have negotiated then." And I think at that point
we've been trying to negotiate. We've been trying to bring Putin to the negotiating
table. But there is a way
table
to negotiate, and I think at that point we would have actually had something to stand on. We're saying you're now threatening to attack the rest of the world here. So now, if you do that, if you do not take them off high alert, then we will do this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in Trump's world he would have done something there, and he would have done whatever he said he would have done.
Trump was in office.
Well, exactly. We know that.
Oh, I'm not so sure that Trump would have been the perfect leader at this point.
I think he would have been. Well, did you hear Joe Biden is calling the Ukrainians Iraqis? I mean, that's so.
Was he awake at the time? I don't
awful. Well, listen, let's find out, because today I'm asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Jill says, yes, it's time to step in. The whole world is held hostage to Putin in case he presses the button, so no more, as we'll always be running scared forever. See, I'm sort of slightly inclined to agree with her there. In fact, I think we should have stepped in a little bit earlier, but in a different way. Ethan says, I feel terrible for the people of Ukraine, but if Britain and NATO get involved, there's a risk of a nuclear war and a terrible loss of British life. I think the risk is too big for the people of the UK. Putin could kill millions. Absolutely, he could as well. Elliot says, no, the time for nuclear war is never. Tandy says, yes, every so often a generation of young people must sacrifice themselves so that bad men like Putin or Trump do not triumph. Young people will hear the call. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, what young people sacrificed themselves to stop Trump? I mean, they went to the voting booth.
Well, he's the only one that's never actually started a war. Right, Mike says all the European armies combined are so small in number, they could barely take on the Moscow Fire Brigade. There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? And currently 28% of you say yes, 72% of you say no. I'm inclined to agree with that. I think it should have been earlier. Right, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, is it a man or is it a bat? Or is it just a prince who ran off to America? Reports suggest that Prince Harry was partly the inspiration for the character of Bruce Wayne, played by Robert Pattinson in the new Batman movie. We'll discuss that and all the latest news from the royal household in our Royal Roundup with Richard Fitzwilliams. We'll be back after this short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, there is always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. On the agenda today, the royal response to the invasion of Ukraine, the Queen recovering from COVID, and how one royal has reportedly inspired the new Batman film. So joining me in the studio is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, thank you for joining me. Right, so let's start. Let's talk about Prince Charles and his support for Ukraine.
Yes, now this was extremely important, and it's worth remembering that in 2014, when in Canada, when Putin went into Crimea, the prince was overheard in a private conversation comparing him to Hitler, and that became public.
Oh, really?
And yes, so it's been an extremely prescient moment, and the prince strongly condemned the brutal aggression, he called it, of the invasion. And this was in a visit with Camilla to Southend-on-Sea, which was a constituency, as you know, of the late Sir David Amess. Yeah. And he, of course, was brutally murdered by an alleged terrorist. And the prince was, of course, drawing parallels. It was a powerful speech, and it's an important point to make.
Yeah, it really. Now, how is the Queen getting on? Because we haven't heard much about her. She had COVID. She's recovering, I hear?
Reports indicate she is very definitely recovering and is doing extremely well. Of course, this was so worrying because, as you know, she just got back to doing public duties. In fact, the very day before her 70th, cutting that cake, which, of course, was rather wonderful.
Bless her.
And then getting COVID, and of course there were several members of the household apparently had it.
I can. Let me just turn my volume up a bit.
Had it. So
yeah, I hear you perfectly.
We're seeing, I think, is the intention of the Queen to hopefully attend Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey, which, you know, the Commonwealth is so close to her heart. And then at the end of this month, we've got the Thanksgiving service for the Duke of Edinburgh.
Now we move on to Prince Harry. What is this story about, this Batman thing?
Well, firstly, let me say that it's an absolutely marvellous movie. I went to the critics' preview.
What's the movie? What's it?
The movie is The Batman, and it's the latest in the...
Is it Batman something? Or?
It's called The Batman.
The Batman,
and
okay.
The director, Matt Reeves, his idea, if you look at Bruce Wayne, who you know is Batman, he's got very entitled. He's very wealthy, but his parents, there has been a tragedy there, and he was asking Robert Pattinson, who plays the Batman, to consider being inspired by a character not unlike Prince Harry, because you had a tragedy in the past, and you also, in the early part of this film, you meet Batman having withdrawn from public life because of the pressures. So there you see that, in a sense, as you know, the Sussexes, with stepping back only to step down, we see the Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, doing exactly the same in this movie. But of course he's got to be active because the Riddler is threatening Gotham City, and it's a glorious creation. This is a real film noir. It's a spectacular. The editing, the photography, is absolutely superb. I was riveted, and it's 2 hours, 56 minutes, and every minute I was on the edge of my seat. And the idea is that Prince Harry played his part in the creation of Robert Pattinson, which I thought was rather a good one.
Really?
He's not one of my favourite actors, but you can see a character feeling the pressure of the limelight, feeling he's got to step back, and then, of course, he realises there's a villain, the Riddler, loose, and that could lead to chaos.
Yes, but the difference here is that Batman sort of becomes a superhero, not an irritant.
I don't think Prince Harry has the superhero qualities, but he did begin Invictus, he did begin Centauri. Who knows what he'll do next? And perhaps he'll be inspired by Batman.
Who knows what he'll do next? Right. Well, listen, Richard, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me. That's Richard Fitzwilliams, a royal commentator. Right, so let's see. A lot of you have been in touch. I've been asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? And lots of you have been sending me your views. Jim says, no need to go to war with Russia as a whole. It's just Putin. That's the problem. Barbara says, surely President Zelensky isn't daft enough to believe that Putin will be halted by a no-fly zone. He has done his best, but doesn't seem to be the right person to be the leader. It needs a cool, brilliant head right now, not bleeding hearts. You don't think so? I think he's done a pretty good job. Pat says we should have challenged him before he got into Ukraine. That's right. I mean, you see that. She says, when you back down to a bully, you get more of the same. That's true. See, that's how I see it as well. I mean, he was on the borders and we were saying, oh, he won't go in. Well, why was he there? There's also a poll up on Twitter today throughout the show asking, is now the time for NATO to engage in conflict with Russia? Currently, 72% of you say, no, we shouldn't engage. Interesting stuff. Well, you can keep your thoughts coming here at GB News. You can also email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Or why not find us on YouTube? You can even watch the shows online and live there. Or you can catch up via the GB News app. So much. You're watching me, Nana Akua, on GB News. More to come in the next hour. So if you've just joined me, it's just fast approaching 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow would consider any third-party declaration of a no-fly zone over Ukraine as participation in the armed conflict. Speaking this afternoon at an aviation school in Moscow, President Putin said his country would view the intervention as a threat. His comments come as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky pushed NATO to impose a no-fly zone over his country. But the alliance says the move, which would bar all unauthorised aircraft from flying over Ukraine, could provoke widespread war in Europe with Russia. The Israeli Prime Minister has met with President Putin in Moscow to discuss the crisis. Naftali Bennett has offered to mediate in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, although officials have previously played down expectations of a breakthrough. Evacuation efforts in the Ukrainian cities of Mariopol and Volnovaka have been halted as Russia reportedly ignores an agreed temporary ceasefire. That's according to the Red Cross. Authorities in Ukraine say fighting is taking place in the Zaporizhzhia region, which is where one of the humanitarian corridor ends. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Irina Vereshchuk, says Russia is thwarting the evacuation plan by not observing a ceasefire.
As you know, starting from 9 a.m, we had a preliminary agreement to create 2 humanitarian corridors in Volnovaka and Mariupol. I can confirm the fact that Russia violated the agreement in which the Red Cross was an intermediary. It did not fulfill undertaken duties and is shelling the town of Volnovaka. We call on the Russian side to stop shelling, restore ceasefire and allow columns to move along the humanitarian corridor so that children, women and elderly people can leave the towns.
The International Monetary Fund says the ongoing war in Ukraine will have a severe impact on the global economy, with significant spillover to other countries. The organisation is warning of serious economic consequences, including surging prices of energy and grain. and that countries with close economic ties to Ukraine and Russia are at particular risk of supply disruptions. It says Ukraine has requested $1.4 billion in emergency money, which is expected to be approved as early as next week. The number of refugees fleeing the Russian invasion could rise to 1.5 million by the end of the weekend. The UN Refugee Agency says the figure stands at 1.3 million and that despite the possibility of humanitarian corridors, the situation remains dire with military action in many places across Ukraine. Speaking in Poland earlier, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced further support.
I'll support the needs of Ukrainians in Poland and other countries. The Biden administration just requested to Congress $2.75 billion in humanitarian assistance. That's both to meet the need of vulnerable people and communities inside Ukraine, as well as to support refugee services, including here in Poland.
The Ministry of Defence says the rate of Russian air and artillery strikes in Ukraine has slowed in the last 24 hours. An intelligence briefing from the MOD reports that Ukraine continues to hold on to the cities Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariopol. Authorities say it's highly likely the cities are surrounded by Russian forces. Former NATO planner Philip Ingram told GB News the country should brace itself for more aggression from Russia.
The Ukrainians are much smaller, weaker force on paper, but with a real resolve that shows the human element of it, are holding back the Russians. In military terms, they fixed them. The Russians haven't got the ability to maneuver, and they've stopped them achieving their objectives. The trouble is, historically, when the Russians don't get their objectives, they then start to go really nasty, and we're in for the long game.
Well, Russia has blocked access to Facebook in the country. The state regulator says the social media platform has been taken down for its discrimination against Russian media. Facebook Vice President of Global Affairs, Sir Nick Clegg, says Russians have been silenced from speaking out. A Formula One team has sacked its Russian driver following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Nikita Mazepin's contract has been terminated by the American-owned team Haas. The driver says he's disappointed with the decision, but has treasured his time at Formula One. The team also ended its deal with its Russian sponsor, Uralkali, owned by Mr. Mazepin's father. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, it's back to Nana.
It's coming up to 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's comedian Leo Kearse and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Still to come in a few moments, I'll ask, is the UK doing enough to support the refugee effort in Ukraine? 1.2 million people have fled the country to find somewhere safe to stay since the start of the invasion by Russia. And we'll cross live to Poland to meet a Brit and his Ukrainian partner who have travelled to help people cross the border. I'll also be joined by a Conservative MP to hear his thoughts on the UK's government's response. The great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? Thousands of people across the UK today are protesting against the rising costs of gas, electricity and fuel. With war in Ukraine, it's likely to get worse as well. So I'm asking, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? Email your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. So we start this hour with my difficult conversation. And this week, we're taking a deeper look into the refugee crisis in Ukraine. Now, the United Nations say that more than 1.2 million people have fled the country since Russian troops invaded their home just over a week ago. And people have been heading west into neighbouring countries, including Poland, Romania, Moldova and Hungary. Well, just this morning, a ceasefire agreed by Russia and Ukraine to evacuate residents from 2 cities in Ukraine has quickly been stopped, with Ukrainian officials saying that Russian troops continued firing on Mariupol and surrounding areas. And here in the UK, the government has announced the length of visas for people fleeing Ukraine to join relatives in the UK to be increased from 12 months to 3 years. Home Secretary Priti Patel said that this would give those escaping the war certainty and more time to find work. But I want to look at whether the UK is actually doing enough to support the refugee effort. Let's start by looking at what the situation is like in Poland. More than 650,000 people have entered the country within the last week. And our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, has been at the Refugee Registration Centre in Helm, 20 kilometres from the border with Ukraine.
Told by the coordinator here, 1,160 refugees registered here, and since the beginning of the war, he reckons about 10,000 refugees have come through here so far. Of course, many of them women and children, because any men of fighting age who are aged 18 to 60, and if they don't have a medical exemption, then they have to go and fight for Ukraine. They get sent back into Ukraine and signed up to fight. So a lot of the people here are women and children. If you come over here, this is where they register. They fill in the documentation first of all. There's English there, or they can register in Ukrainian over here. They can also help themselves to food. So if we come over here, there are various groceries that have been donated by the people of Poland for them to collect. Look, there's a box here with some tin food in it, some bread, some toilet rolls. This one looks like it's for children. There's some kids' food in there. There's an apple as well. And then over here there seems to be more kids stuff. In fact, it seems to be the area where, especially if you've brought children, you can go. Over here there's some child's car seats as well, if that helps with your journey. Some cardboard boxes on the far wall. And then over here, this is where people are registering their SIM cards so they can stay in touch with loved ones in Ukraine. If we go over here, this is where people are waiting to move on with their journey to other parts of Europe. Places like Estonia, also Hungary, Slovakia, Germany, France, possibly even the UK. But if you're not able to make your onward journey today when you arrive, they do have camping beds laid out in the sports hall in there for you to sleep in overnight. The man we spoke to, the coordinator, said that by around about 3-4 o'clock, normally all the beds are full and there's nowhere to sleep. So one would imagine that you have to sleep out here. If we take a little wander through here, you can see here there's a microwave there, so you can heat up food or maybe heat up your baby milk, some rolls that have been made up, and some drinks here. Someone here is making a cup of coffee. And then over here, some biscuits. And then down the far end, there are more people here who are waiting to make their onward journey. And it has to be said, some of them, they don't necessarily know any other Ukrainian nationals in other European countries. They don't necessarily have any idea of where they're going. Sometimes a lady with a megaphone shouts out that there's a bus that is on its way to Germany in the next 5 minutes. And some people just have to make the decision, are we going to go to Germany or are we going to wait for the next call and possibly go to somewhere like France? So for those people who don't have a plan about their onward journey, they're pretty much making it up as they go along. And they don't know what's going to happen when they get to that country, whether they're going to try and find work or whether they're just going to try and stick it out. Because, of course, no one knows when this war is going to end, but one thing you can say for certain is that they're much safer here, and even though their men, their brothers, their husbands, possibly their fathers are fighting in Ukraine, they're much safer here for now.
That's Paul Hawkins. He's out there in Poland. I can now cross to Alexander Hammond, Maria Chapila. They've both travelled to Poland from the UK to help with the refugee support effort on the border. Maria, I will start with you. You're Ukrainian. Why did you feel that you wanted to travel to Poland to help in this way?
Thank you. Well, as a Ukrainian, I have family in Ukraine, and some of my family relatives were in Kiev on the day when Russian government started bombing the city. And obviously, I got very scared. Got woken up at 5 a.m. Them calling, all being scared, all being nervous. What do we do? Where do we go? And then I got to talk to my parents who live in Western Ukraine, and they told me that the situation there was also very grim. That there is reports of saboteurs going from house to house, and overall the situation looked very bleak. For the first 2 days, I was trying to do my best to help in any way I could, but then I just realized I felt really helpless, and Alex was very supportive of the idea to go to Poland so that we can help in any way we can other people who are fleeing the war in Ukraine, as well as pick up my family.
I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. It really is. Alexander, I want to ask you, because you've been driving around picking refugees up and taking them to accommodation. Tell us what the conditions are like.
Well, honestly, of all the people we're working with, there's just a heck of a lot of scared women and children who don't know where to go, don't want to leave their men, fathers, husbands, brothers behind in Ukraine. And ultimately, a lot of refugees have been extremely reluctant to leave in the first place, though, of course, they are extremely grateful for help. And as Maria said, we drove from Milton Keynes to Poland on Sunday. And our initial intention was to kind of help Maria's family and a few other mutual contacts we knew. But then we decided to set up a GoFundMe to cover some of those costs, and the support absolutely skyrocketed. And we've got several thousands of pounds to now really help other people on the ground. And our mission initially just to come and help a family and a few other people has gone well beyond that. And we've been able to offer far more support than we could have possibly imagined, and to many more people. We're helping many women and children to put them in accommodation, so far ranging from 2 to 30 days at extremely short notice, just so they've got that time to kind of rest, get their mind around the situation, and then move on to their next plan. We've got so many examples of different people we've helped put in, from mothers with infants who are still breastfeeding, who call 8 p.m. at night looking for somewhere to go. And that's where Airbnb, Booking.com, Uber has been so invaluable to us to coordinate these efforts.
I was going to ask, Marie, so you went to the border. Have you actually managed to hook up with your family and actually see them now and things?
Yes, thankfully they were able to leave Ukraine and come over here. So we managed to pick them up. Some of my family is still in Ukraine. They're considering coming here as well. But obviously we have to remember that it's a very, very difficult decision for Ukrainians to leave, because they're leaving their homes, and there is. We're all trying to stay optimistic, but there is a worry that even though we are leaving, everyone wants to come back. But there is a worry that we might not be able to go back to our homes, see our friends, and carry on with the life that we used to have.
And there's an enormous problem as well, because even though we're here now in accommodation with some of Maria's family, even though the Polish people have been absolutely amazing and hugely supportive to all Ukrainian refugees, in an ideal situation, we'd take them back to England. We've got friends, family who can offer room support, huge support networks. However, right now, we wouldn't make it past Calais. A couple of family members would, because they meet the current visa requirements, but aunties and cousins who are still young and in need won't. So I think it's really important as well to try and, the government should really consider urgently waiving these visa requirements for Ukrainian refugees fleeing.
And now I heard reports that they were sending people of colour back if they got to the border in Poland. Have you seen any of that?
No, we didn't about sending back, but we are trying to understand how to bring my family to the UK as well as the extended family, and it's a bit difficult at the moment to understand how things should work, and it's a lot of technical details that we have to understand and navigate, because we were not prepared for this. Even though there's been reports of Russia preparing to invade our country, no one was making some big plans about where to go, what to do.
And with people from other nationalities leaving Ukraine, we have seen many people who have crossed the border, and I know there have been reports of people being refused out and things like that. But even right now, we're helping someone of Afghan descent in accommodation who has managed to flee. So honestly, we're not right on the border witnessing what the guards are doing. We're more shuttling people between cities, sorting out their accommodation and any other help they need. But we have been helping people from other nationalities who have come from Ukraine too. So they are definitely, at least some are definitely getting through, to say the least.
That's really good to hear. Alexander, thank you so much for joining me, and Maria as well. Hope everything is okay and that your family are all safe and well. Really good to talk to you. They're there in Poland supporting Ukrainian refugees. Wow, I mean, the situation is awful. And here back in the UK, I'm going to speak to Councillor David Simmons now. He's the Conservative MP for Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner. And he's also the chair of the Local Government Association Asylum and Refugee Task Group. David, the announcements from the government regarding who is able to apply for refugee status here in the UK, do you think they go far enough?
In the circumstances, the government's trying to work fast. I mean, the primary strategy the UK government has is to provide military support to the government of Ukraine to defend their country. And for the vast majority of refugees, as we've seen in previous crises like the one in Syria and Afghanistan, most people want to be able to return home eventually. So their first choice will be to find refuge in a country nearby with a view to keeping in contact with friends and family. But there are those with connections to the UK, and although I just slightly to correct your introduction, I no longer have a role with the Local Government Association. Central government is working with local authorities across the country to identify those who can provide accommodation for people with connections to the UK. And we've seen a number of announcements about visa rules that are being steadily relaxed with a view to more people who are fleeing Ukraine but with connections to the UK being able to find sanctuary here.
So in your view, do you think the government have gone far enough, though, because they've obviously opened it out a bit further now? Do you think they've gone far enough with that?
It's very much a watching brief because we know that the government of Ukraine is launching a very staunch defence of their country. We know that the military supplies from the UK, the European Union and allies are helping them in that task. And ideally what we want to see is peace and stability. But we can clearly know that the way the Russians are conducting this war, the way they've conducted wars in other countries, is going to displace lots of people. And it is important, firstly, that in the UK that we raise funds, because what countries like Poland have been very clear about is they need money to purchase the goods that refugees need. They prefer that rather than physical goods being sent because the cost of distributing them is much greater than the value of those goods. But also we need to make sure that for those who have that connection to the UK, that they're able to travel as easy as possible. And I know from people I've spoken to, that's not the case at the moment. We need to make sure that the experience at the border, for example, at Calais, in Paris, where people may be boarding the Eurostar, is going to enable those people to make those family connections and to find a place of safety quickly.
Yeah, because I was going to ask about that, because if someone's come from Ukraine and then they get to France, you know, we don't want them getting in a dinghy. So I'm wondering, has Priti Patel and the Home Secretary joined the dots to make sure that people can actually get to that next stage if they do want to come to the UK? Because all very well offering the refuge, but if there's nowhere to get to it, then that makes it very difficult.
The policy that's been announced should help that. The experience I'm hearing from people on the ground is that the technology where you can make this application for your visa online isn't working as well as it should yet. But I know that that is something which people from the Home Office will be working on 24 hours a day to try and make sure that that is operating. We know that if people have made it to France, they are at least in a place of safety. They are some distance now from Putin's soldiers, but we need to make sure that they can make the onward journey to the United Kingdom when they have that connection here.
OK, well, listen, it's really good to talk to you. I could ask you questions about this forever, but I haven't sadly got that much time. David, it's really good to talk to you. That's Councillor David Simmons. He's an MP for the Conservative Party at Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner, and the chair of the LGA Asylum and Refugee Task Group. So still to come, it's the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? Campaigners from Sheffield, London and even Glasgow have marched together against the rising costs of gas, electricity and fuel. The TUC union is now calling on Chancellor Rishi Sunak to announce measures to cushion families from the possible increase in prices due to the Russian invasion. So is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk and tell me your thoughts, or tweet me at gbnews. But first, let's get a weather update.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many away from eastern and central England. Let's take a look at those details. Zooming into the southwest, and it will be a fine end to the day. It will turn chilly though once the sun goes down as skies remain clear. Moving east, and it will be a cloudy and damp evening across southeast England and East Anglia. Winds will be brisk, especially along the coast. We move back into the clear skies across Wales this evening, with just a little cloud across the hills and mountains. Far west of the Midlands will also see clear skies this evening, but elsewhere it will be rather cloudy. The cloud will be thick enough in places to give some rain. Northern England, however, will see a dry and fine evening with any cloud and showers generally easing away. It will lead to a chilly start to the night, though with a frost quickly developing. There will be a few showers still in the north of Scotland. Otherwise, it will be dry and clear this evening, leading to a cold end to the day. It will also be chilly in Northern Ireland as the sunshine gives way to clear skies this evening. Winds will be light, leading to the odd fog patch forming. Overnight, we'll see the clearest and coldest weather in the north, whereas further south will be cloudier, but temperatures staying above freezing here. That's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. My panel today, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and comedian Leo Kearse. Right, some of the biggest trade unions, including the TUC, are calling on Chancellor Rishi Sunak to announce measures to help support families with the cost of living crisis. The wholesale cost of gas broke records yesterday. Petrol also hit a new high at the pump at 153p per litre. And some analysts suggest that the conflict in Ukraine could add to the highest rates of inflation for 3 decades here in the UK. So if a sustained rise in oil and gas prices reach households, that could be the prognosis. So today, campaigners marched through streets across the UK in protest of the rising costs of living. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is there a solution to this cost of living crisis? I'm joined by Saira Ershad, who runs the charity Mums United in Sheffield, working with families to tackle youth violence. She was at the protests in Sheffield today. Saira, why do you feel that the need to actually protest against this crisis?
I think it's really important because there's so many lives that will be affected. Everyone's life will be affected. And we're all already seeing the struggle today. And what's it going to be like after April? That's why it's so important for us all to acknowledge that, you know, there's a serious problem that needs to be looked at and actually acknowledged and dealt with efficiently by the government. It's not good enough just to say that, you know, there's short-term measurable outcomes. We need a long-term solution of how, you know, families from the working class to the top are going to survive this.
Now, you work with a lot of families, and how are they coping currently? Because the cost of living crisis is not great, but it is even set to rise. There's a national insurance rise coming as well. What do you What would you, how are the families, what are they saying to you, and what would you like to see happen?
I mean, we've been living with over 10 years of austerity, and we have had families that are struggling to survive. And we run a charitable bank, Mums United Charitable Bank, at the Wicker, and we give food, clothes and non-perishable food to low-income based families, refugee families, and we feed the homeless twice a week. Now, in the past 3 to 4 months, there's been a hell of a lot more people coming. It's doubled. People coming to the centre. People are worried. People are scared that they are not going to be able to feed their families. How are they going to pay for the heating bills when we're already struggling? So people are worried, and rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, it is a worrying time as well. What support would you like to see the government come up with? Because, as you said, we're all feeling this. This is not going to go away anytime soon. So what do you think the government could do to help?
I think the government needs to actually come out and look at what we're doing here, and actually see and speak to the people at grassroots levels, and actually see what impact this will have. And for them to find a solution, look at sustainable energy, look at, how we can support the people who are struggling, by increasing their benefits or helping with their gas bills. I think the government needs to do more, and we would like them to do something more tangible in helping our communities.
And it's normal people like you who are actually doing things to try and help this crisis. In fact, you're slightly letting the government off on this as well. What is your view of the fact that a lot of MPs have now received a £2,000 pay rise?
I think they should give that to the working class people. I don't think there should be a pay rise. Why is it that the rich are just getting richer? Why is it that the oil companies and the gas companies are making millions? And why is it that the MPs are getting a pay rise whilst, we're not getting a pay rise? The cost of living has increased, inflation is increasing. How are we, the working class, how are we meant to manage? And I think that, everything should be capped. I think all the rich people who are earning over a certain threshold, it should be stopped, and I think the government should tax the rich more, and find a solution, because we're paying for this at the end of the day, and the government needs to just do something.
Well, listen, Sarah, keep doing what you're doing, because obviously you're helping a lot of people. It's really good to talk to you. That's Sarah Ashad. She runs Mums United in Sheffield. Well, a government spokesperson said, "We recognise the pressures people are facing with the cost of living and are providing support worth around £20 billion this financial year and next to help. This includes a £200 reduction on bills this autumn and a £150 non-payable reduction in council tax bills, on top of the existing £12 billion of support that we have in place already. The energy price cap also continues to insulate millions of customers from volatile global gas prices. And we're also putting an average of £1,000 more per year into the pockets of working families via changes to universal credit and boosting the minimum wage by more than £1,000 a year for full-time workers." So I'm asking, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Rob says there's several, including not voting Tory. Yeah, you say that, but the Labour Party are renowned for spending a lot more. Amelia says, yes, buy less tech, clothes and material goods, cook more healthy meals, not processed foods, and move around more by foot and bicycle. Stuart says, why does no one think of insulation? It's the #1 solution to the energy price crisis. And if done properly, people won't have to pay as much for their energy. That's a very good point. And so Insulate Britain actually did have a point, except they've just made it very, very badly. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue the Great British Debate. And I'm asking, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, comedian Leo Kearse and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. But first, let's get to your latest news headlines.
It's 5:31. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow would consider any third-party declaration of a no-fly zone over Ukraine as participation in the armed conflict. His comments come as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky pushed Nato to impose a no-fly zone over his country. But the alliance says the move, which would bar all unauthorised aircraft from flying over Ukraine, could provoke widespread war in Europe with Russia. Ukraine and Russia will hold the third round of talks on Monday in a bid to reach an end to the conflict. It comes as the Israeli Prime Minister met with President Putin in Moscow to discuss the Ukraine crisis. Naftali Bennett has offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, although officials have previously played down expectations of a breakthrough. The International Monetary Fund says the ongoing war in Ukraine will have a severe impact on the global economy, with significant spillover to other countries. The organisation is warning of serious economic consequences, including surging prices of energy and grain. It says Ukraine has requested $1.4 billion in emergency money, which is expected to be approved as early as next week. Evacuation efforts in the Ukrainian cities of Mariopol and Volnovaka have been halted as Russia reportedly ignores an agreed temporary ceasefire. That's according to the Red Cross. Authorities in Ukraine say fighting is taking place in the Zaporizhzhia region, which is where one of the humanitarian corridor ends. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk says Russia is thwarting the evacuation plan by not observing a ceasefire.
As you know, starting from 9 a.m, we had a preliminary agreement to create 2 humanitarian corridors in Volnovaka and Mariupol. I can confirm the fact that Russia violated the agreement in which the Red Cross was an intermediary. It did not fulfill undertaken duties and is shelling the town of Volnovaka. We call on the Russian side to stop shelling, restore ceasefire and allow columns to move along the humanitarian corridor so that children, women and elderly people can leave the towns.
Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister speaking there. Well, this is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Back to Nana Akua in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 5:36. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Now back to our Great British Debate this hour. Campaigners have taken to the streets across the UK today against the rising cost of gas, electricity and fuel. It says the wholesale cost of gas broke records, with petrol also hitting a new high at the pump of 153 pence per litre. And several of Britain's biggest trade unions, including the TUC, are now calling on Chancellor Rishi Sunak to announce measures to help support families with the cost of living crisis. So I'm asking, is there a solution to it? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and comedian Leo Kearse. I'll start with you, Calvin. Cost of living, it's skyrocketing. What is your view?
I'm in favour of austerity measures. When I was a deputy head of a school, I implemented austerity measures. We saved enough money to hire new teachers. This is how you don't live beyond your means. That's how you get by. Unfortunately, our Conservative government have forgotten that. And we have a socialist Conservative government at the moment that they've spent, throughout the pandemic on track and trace and millions of pounds on apps that don't work, on furlough scheme when they should have just kept businesses open and let people live their lives. And now, to fix that, they want to charge us more. They want to put our taxes up, like national insurance, for example. And rather than letting us keep more of the money that we earn, they're saying, OK, what we're going to do is we're going to force a loan on you. So they're going to put all of us into debt. This idea that they're going to reduce energy bills by £200 this year is a lie.
Well, it's joking. It's not enough.
By Sunak. He's going to give the money to the energy companies, not to us.
That's right.
£200 for every person. That's going to take off. It's a negligible amount of our bills. But for every year from 2023 onwards, for the next 5 years, all of us will be paying an extra £40 per year, regardless of whether we receive this loan in the first place. So actually, they're going to make more money from us. This is a scam that you can't opt out of.
Well, the price cap, I think, comes in October as well. So the £200 that they're giving you is actually probably negligible. So it'll probably end up being a minus sum anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Calvin said, and I'd also add that we've been led down an ideological dead end by green policy. This rush towards net zero. So we've stopped developing our own oil fields, like the Campbell oil field in Scotland. We've stopped developing our own sources of natural gas through fracking or whatever. So we've been left completely dependent on Russia. And obviously, right now,
well, we're not quite. It's only about 5% of our energy.
But Europe is a wider, and also Russia affects we pay the price in the market, and Russian supply affects that price. So effectively, it doesn't matter if it's directly coming from Russia or whatever. It affects the market price, which is what we pay, which is what Russia receives. So it all ends up there. So we've been funding. Europe has been funding Putin's military buildup. It's disgusting. So we need to end with this net zero fixation. It's nonsense. We need to redevelop our nuclear power. We need to have power in the UK. We need to develop our oil fields and our gas fields as well. And that'll be British jobs for British people.
What about insulation? What about the
energy.
government? What about the government investing in actually paying us to insulate our homes? Because as we look on, we know that a lot of the energy that you put in your house, the heating and everything, actually escapes, and you lose a lot of it.
Government pay. If people want to insulate their homes, they should insulate their homes. If it's going to save them money on their energy bills, they should do that.
Well, instead of investing this and giving us all £200 off and £150 off this and that, perhaps if there was some, I don't know how much you can get to insulate a home, but if they're going to do that, I would say that would be a far more effective way of actually helping people save money from fuel in terms of heating up your house.
I'd say they should do neither. So the people that say, the government needs to help us more and give us more money towards our bills or give us more benefits, no, the government shouldn't be handing out more public money. They should be enabling you to make more money. They should be giving you, charging you less tax or giving you more of the money that you are earning in your job. It's not the government's job to take my money and give it to Tom.
Well, but I'm saying simply instead of what they're doing, which doesn't sound like the right thing, what about the idea that they could actually recoup some of the money that they gave wantonly to people through COVID? Because, it's at least 13 billion, at least.
Yeah, but they've given it. They've given it out.
But it was done fraudulently, and they need to find those people. Why should we have to suck that up?
Because the government is incompetent, they can't find these people. That's why they're not attempting to. So many people filled out fraudulent claims because there wasn't very much of a procedure in place, and people took that money that the government was handing out willy-nilly, and it's gone now, unfortunately. They shouldn't have done it in the first place. It's almost as if it was a test for universal basic income to see if people would be happy staying at home, being dependent on the state. And it seems a lot of people would. Yeah. That's a shame, because people get something from contributing to society, from going out and working and providing for their family. And that is, that's part of being a human being. So to take that away and at home dependent on a welfare state. That is the socialist dream, and it's a nightmare to me.
Do you think people have just got used to this now, though, so they're expecting it? Because it was like when Rishi Sunak gave the £20 extra uplift for universal credit, people said he did say it was temporary, and then when he took it back, people said, oh, well, how could you? Do you think that people have now become so dependent they expect the state to help them out?
Government subsidies are never the answer. They're never the answer. I mean, why should... So, for example, with electric cars, the early adopters are rich people because electric cars are expensive, but the government subsidises it. With insulation, you've got homeowners having their insulation subsidised by people who are renting. So why should bus drivers and cleaners who live in rented flats be subsidising rich people having insulation put in their lofts or rich people buying electric cars? Subsidy is never the answer. The market is the answer.
Do you think...
The market should be as free as possible as well. We had a suggestion earlier on that we should cap earnings so people can't earn too much money. That's a very dangerous, very scary suggestion. And enable people to earn more money, help people become richer, to climb the social mobility ladder. Don't restrict people and bring everyone down to the lowest common denominator. And that's what socialism is. It's everyone being equally poor.
Well, do you know, it's interesting that because obviously the cost of living is going sky high. And in my view, if the prices rise, when I was studying my economics and business degrees, I was told, look, you could either budget or make more money. So for me, I always go, well, I've got to try and make more money in some way. You know, I literally will try and find more jobs, more work in the space of time, in the little spaces that I have. I know it's not easy for everyone or not possible for everyone, but there is that aspect as well. I think we need to start looking at how, as the cost of living soars, there are a lot of jobs out there at the moment, and if people can have a second income, MPs have second incomes, which don't get me started on that lot. I mean, they've just had a £2,000 rise, which I think is totally unacceptable and totally inappropriate at this time. But, you know, there is that. I think we are a bit doom-laden, aren't we? We're like, oh, this is going up and that is going up. And yes, it is going up. But if you have it within you to find more work and do more, then that could be a route as well.
Well, that's personal responsibility. That's another core British value that we've forgotten about. We should be helping ourselves become better people and earn more money rather than relying on the state to fix it for us, because the state cannot fix anything. The state just makes mistakes. They are incompetent and they make things worse.
There's a lot of angles there. They could, first of all, try and recoup the money they've wasted. They could then stop that national insurance rise, which is just a bit of a joke. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's have a chat with our Great British Voice, because the show is nothing without you. And Great British Voice is your chance to be on the show. Tell us what you think about what we're talking about. And Simon Kelsey is a B&B owner and a property developer in Hull. Simon, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis?
Well, at the moment, we are really being squeezed. Our heating the last few months has been £700 a month, and it's going up 40%. And there's only a certain amount we can do. I mean, I've stopped having days off. We don't block the rooms ever, so we don't have days off. We haven't put our prices up yet, but there's only so much we can put the prices up. So it's pretty hard. And of course, it will get worse. We're talking about a really volatile situation at the moment, because at some point we'll probably stop getting gas from Russia. Otherwise, like one of your commentators said, we are funding their war, and we can't keep doing that. So actually, the price is going to go through the roof. The petrol will get more. And yet, as another one of your commentators said, you know, there's massive, massive bonuses coming through to Shell and BP. They're having a great time of it. They're making bumper profits. So why can't we tax them? I mean, I'm not saying it's some great socialist thing, but there is a lot of money coming in that small businesses like us are just not seeing. I can't go and get another job because I'm busy 7 days a week. And with the thing, we've got young kids. As it is, we stopped using one of our cars. We are doing everything we can, and we're not having days off. And, you know, we are really being squeezed, but we see £16 billion profits.
I know, it's ridiculous. Simon, very briefly, though, and it's a yes or no, have you insulated your home?
We've spent about £7,000 insulating our home. You know, all the internal walls are covered in Kingspan. We've got 8 inches in the loft of rock wool.
So that's a yes.
It's a very old building. There's only so much we can do there. So we are doing everything.
Yeah. Simon, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Simon Kelsey. He's a B&B owner there. And a property developer. So he's insulated his home as well, you see. So, but I do agree. I mean, look, I'm not happy with Insulate Britain throwing themselves onto the motorways and stopping all the traffic. I find that very irritating, to be fair. But they have got a point in that...
They should do it on the motorway leading into Kyiv. Stop the Russian tanks.
Well, you know, that probably wouldn't work out for them because the tanks would just drive over them.
Then everybody wins.
What I'm saying, but what I was saying is that I personally think that they've got a good point that we do lose a lot of electricity and a lot of, you know, heat from our homes. So that could help to reduce the bills, and that's for our own self. And I think that the government could look at subsidising people for that instead of, if they're doing this, chucking money at you, giving you a £200 reduction and all that. That's half-hearted, it's meaningless. Actually put it towards people getting insulation. That might help a little bit.
They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to come up with magic ideas. There are many, many really good think tanks, the Taxpayers Association, Adam Smith Institute, that are coming up with amazing policy. The government just has to implement it. I don't know why they're not.
They're not. I don't know why. Why aren't they?
Well, if you look at me and Calvin, we've actually started insulating ourselves. Like, we're both wearing jumpers. Calvin's wearing tweed. I got a hair transplant, so I'm fully thatched. Calvin's got this magnificent afro. You know, the amount of money we're saving through not having to heat ourselves.
You've got your booster light on. As well. The hair on your face will keep your mouth warm so you can keep talking nonsense. I mean, honestly. What about, very briefly, the national insurance hike? That is coming through in April. Should they stop that?
A Conservative government should never, ever, ever be raising taxes. It's just unconservative.
Yeah, there's so much waste and inefficiency and profligacy across the public sector. They should slash. Look at local government spending. That's where so much waste goes on.
Absolutely, isn't it? All those council officers and all those extra people, and then net zero managers. And I mean, this is just unbelievably bad. But today I've been asking, is there a solution to the cost of living crisis? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Diane says we have become so wasteful, buying clothes that we never wear, sitting in T-shirts with the heating on. We pay to have nails done and have takeaways delivered. We drive very large gas guzzlers. Why? Also, we throw so much food away. Finally, we borrow money for items we don't need. Well, I don't do all that. Do you do that? That's obviously what you do. How do you know most people do that? No, I'll be honest, I'm guilty for that. Sarah says, if you budget every week and plan your meals, you'd be amazed how much money you can save. Let's all be smart with our money, isn't it true? In fact, I say go through your bank account and look at the direct debits that you're spending on things that you don't actually do, like possibly going to the gym. In a few years, we can get, and who's this one? This is from Monty. Monty says, in a few years, we can get electric cars and not have to pay anything for fuel. That'll be great. Hang on a minute, Monty. Have you seen the price of the electricity? And where do you think you get the, and how do you think you get, you have to get the electricity generated from the gas coming from Russia, isn't it? I mean, electricity doesn't just appear.
The early subsidies for electric cars meant you could charge them for free. But that was just for the very rich elite who could afford them at the start. Now that they're becoming mass market, of course you're going to have to pay for the electricity.
Of course they will. It's just going to be like diesel again. Oh, yeah, get diesel. It's a lot more efficient than it. Oh, yeah, right. Now scrap your diesel car, buy another one. You need electric because you're ruining the planet. Well, now it's time for my quickfire quiz. That's the part of the show where we judge the panel on some of the week's and other news stories. And I've got with me, if you've just joined us, comedian Leo Kearse and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Right, and they're both going to buzz in. So, Calvin, can I hear your buzzer, please? And Leo, your buzzer.
In support of the Canadian truckers.
Very good. Fantastic. Right, question one. Please play along at home. Cheese lovers, I love cheese, it's great, isn't it? Have been left astounded after a woman on TikTok showed them that they'd been doing something wrong for years. But what was it? Was it A, grating cheese the wrong way? Was it B, leaving the packet unsealed so the ends go hard? Or was it C, cutting it widthways instead of lengthways? Go on, Calvin.
C, cutting it the wrong way.
Absolutely wrong. Leo, you can have a guess, a free guess.
Is it B?
No, it's A. I knew you'd both get it wrong. It's actually A, yes.
So how do you grate it?
Well, whatever. American TikToker made a video demonstrating how you can grate cheese much quicker. You just need to keep the cheese stationary and move the grater on it rather than moving the cheese up and down. And see, because I did the cheese up and down. Is that right? Same. After hearing that, have you been grating cheese the wrong way?
Well, apparently.
Is there a right or wrong way, though?
She said it. She said there was.
I don't understand how that would make it faster. If you're moving...
The cheese is heavy against the grater.
You've got to hold the cheese, she says, and then you go back and forth with the grater rather than...
That makes sense.
Where's the cheese going? I want to see a video. I want to see some proof.
Next time with this, what we need is a grater and we need cheese, and I need to do a demonstration. We'll make that happen next time. We'll make that happen. Otherwise, heads will roll. Right, question two. Please play along. Did you get that right at home? No? A man from Poland's broken the Guinness World Record for the amount of time with his body spent fully submerged in ice. But how long did he spend in an ice bath? Nearest guess wins. You need to buzz in.
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Well, how's he going to breathe?
6 minutes.
You need to buzz in, otherwise I can't accept your answer. The answer... It's 3 hours and 28 minutes. That's what I was saying. What are you talking about?
So he held his breath for 3 hours and 28 minutes?
No,
his face wasn't submerged. His body was. I knew
so he wasn't fully submerged.
That's why I thought that's very silly. I think both of you don't deserve a point at all for your ridiculous answers. But I'll give it to Calvin. Calvin won. It's 3 hours and 28 minutes. I never said he went under the ice. Right, so that's why I went, what? Right, so Polish endurance enthusiast Walajan Romanowski recently broke the record of 2 hours and 35 minutes and 33 seconds set by Francis Romain. I'm not going to say that. But how long do you think you could spend submerged in an ice bath?
0 seconds.
But you're Scottish, you could do that. You like the cold.
No, Scottish people don't live in ice baths.
They don't have baths in Scotland.
What about you, Cal?
I just wouldn't do it. It's stupid.
You wouldn't?
Why would anyone do that?
Because actually going in ice is actually very good for your body. It's really good for your skin.
3 hours.
Why? I mean, why? We obviously haven't evolved to have ice baths. How could it possibly be good for us?
People do that, especially if you're a sports person or something and you've had an injury or something.
Really?
They do ice baths all the time. Yeah. Have you not heard of rice? Rest ice compression elevation. Oh, really? For goodness sake. Right, question 3. Scientists have been monitoring an out-of-control unidentified spacecraft, but what do they believe has just happened to it? Is it A, it exploded? Is it B, it crashed into the moon? Or is it C, it found possible alien life? Calvin.
C, there's alien life.
No, B, it crashed into the
I like the
moon.
suspense there.
Alien life. No, it was B, it crashed into the moon.
Is it B, it crashed into the moon?
It was indeed, yes, it was. Scientists were tracking the unidentified spacecraft, but it projected to hit the moon's surface on midday on Friday. And they say that it's probably Chinese, although the country denied it. So should countries be sending rockets up at the moment, or are there bigger issues to be spending cash on?
I think it's not really the best time to be spending. It depends where they come down again. I mean, if you're going to be sending them up and they come down in Moscow, that could be a very tricky situation right now.
They could start World War III. We haven't already.
We should be exploring. We should have scientists up there. We should be back on the moon. We should be doing all of that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Would you go in a space rocket to the moon?
No, probably not.
Interestingly, when I was in Belarus, somebody told me that we think of Yuri Gagarin as the first man, the first cosmonaut in space, and they said no, he was the first one to come back alive.
Ah, right, yeah, of course that would be the case, wouldn't it? Because the other ones wouldn't live to tell the tale. And if it was in one of those countries, you never hear about it. Question 4, true or false? The world's largest cruise liner, which entered passenger service in Florida yesterday, is just a few metres shorter in length than the Eiffel Tower is tall. Is that true or false? Leo?
Is it true?
Calvin, you can buzz, you can say...
Is it false?
Right, let's see who's right. Yeah, give it a chance. Let's see, why not? It's false, Calvin, you win that one. It's false. The Wonder of the Seas cruise liner is actually bigger than the Eiffel Tower. It's 362 metres compared to the French landmark, which is 324 metres. It also has 4 swimming pools, 20 restaurants, and a crew of 2,300. What could bear that? So if you've ever been on a cruise, I would love to go on one, but nobody would take me or pay me. Right, so today I'm asking...
It's a one-way ticket.
Is now the time for Nato... Thank you for that. To engage in conflict with Russia, and lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Jim says no, because that would end the world, potentially, yes. Shane says yes, Putin will not stop at Ukraine, and the West's pacifist stance can only have increased his confidence to continue on his path. Julia says Putin can literally have whatever he wants because he has a nuclear armoury. Let's face it, what would we actually be able to do if he goes further and into NATO territory? Nothing. The longer we wait to act, the worse this will be. Toby says, yes, we need to accept World War III has already started and do something about Putin instead of these stupid economic sanctions which don't achieve a thing. Interesting. We've also had a poll up throughout the show asking the same question, and 28% of you say yes and 72% of you say no. It's been a pleasure as ever. Thank you so much to my panel, comedian Leo Kearse and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. It's been really good fun, guys. Thank you so much. Are you back next week?
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not. And I've got to say a big thank you to you at home for joining me. It's a pleasure as ever. I'll be back tomorrow at the same time at 4 o'clock. Don't forget you can catch up using the GB News app. Go and find us at GB News, or you could even email us your thoughts and things you'd like us to comment on and talk about. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, I'll see you tomorrow at 4. Make sure you tune in. I'll leave you with the weather forecast. Enjoy your Saturday.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK's looking dry and clear for many away from eastern and central England. Let's take a look at those details. Zooming into the southwest, and it will be a fine end to the day. It will turn chilly though once the sun goes down as skies remain clear. Moving east, and it will be a cloudy and damp evening across southeast England and East Anglia. Winds will be brisk, especially along the coast. We move back into the clear skies across Wales this evening, with just a little cloud across the hills and mountains. Far west of the Midlands will also see clear skies this evening, but elsewhere it will be rather cloudy. The cloud will be thick enough in places to give some rain. Northern England, however, will see a dry and fine evening with any cloud and showers generally easing away. It will lead to a chilly start to the night, though with a frost quickly developing. There will be a few showers still in the north of Scotland. Otherwise, it will be dry and clear this evening, leading to a cold end to the day. It will also be chilly in Northern Ireland as the sunshine gives way to clear skies this evening. Winds will be light, leading to the odd fog patch forming. Overnight, we'll see the clearest and coldest weather in the north, whereas further south will be cloudier, but temperatures staying above freezing here. That's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, as Sage are disbanded, I say good riddance. My Mark Meets guest is Donald Trump's former head of communications, Anthony Scaramucci. How would Donald Trump be handling the Ukraine crisis? Also on the show, has the pandemic killed free speech? We hear from former government minister Edwina Currie and Fleet Street and radio legend Mike Porky Parry. And in the news agenda with